Lena Davis starts her dream job with high hopes, but subtle hostility from a coworker quickly escalates into something destructive. As rumors spread, Lena realizes her reputation and her career are at risk. What will it take to expose the truth behind the lies, and can she save everything she's worked so hard for? Before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Let's dive in. Lena Davis had always believed that hard work and integrity would speak for themselves. After earning a degree in marketing and spending years perfecting her craft, she finally landed a position at one of the most prestigious firms in the city, Crest Point Marketing Solutions. It felt like the culmination of years of effort, determination, and resilience. Lena entered her new role with excitement, ready to make an impact and grow within the company. Her first few weeks were promising. The projects she worked on were dynamic, and Lena's ideas were innovative, often bringing fresh perspectives to the table. She was eager to show her team the skills she had honed throughout her career. The atmosphere at the office seemed welcoming, and her direct supervisor, Sandra, often complimented her on her work. However, not everyone at Crest Point shared the same enthusiasm for Lena's success. Mark Turner, a senior marketing strategist, had been with the company for nearly a decade. Well regarded by some, he was known for his sharp opinions and competitive nature. Mark had been considered a top performer at the firm for years, and many of his colleagues treated him with deference. But from the moment Lena was introduced to the team, she noticed a certain tension in the air whenever Mark was present. He was polite on the surface, but there was something in his demeanor that made Lena uncomfortable. At first, she told herself it was nothing. People had their quirks, and perhaps Mark was just one of those colleagues who took time to warm up to new employees. She didn't want to read too much into his distant attitude, especially when everyone else seemed friendly enough. But over the following weeks, the tension became harder to ignore. During team meetings, Mark would often interrupt Lena mid-sentence, dismissing her ideas before she could fully explain them. His voice, calm yet cutting, seemed to carry an air of superiority. While Lena tried to stay composed, his constant undermining left her feeling frustrated and overlooked. The most infuriating part was that some of her ideas, once ignored by Mark, would later resurface during meetings, slightly tweaked and credited to him. The first time it happened, Lena chalked it up to coincidence. By the third time, she knew it wasn't. Lena confided in her best friend, Michelle, over coffee one Saturday afternoon. "I just don't get it," she said, stirring her drink absently. "I thought I'd be walking into a collaborative environment, but it feels like I'm fighting to be heard. And it's only been a month." Michelle, a seasoned HR professional at a different company, nodded thoughtfully. "It sounds like he sees you as competition," she said. "Some people can't handle seeing others succeed, especially if they feel threatened by it. You're smart, capable, and you bring fresh ideas to the table. Maybe that's exactly why he's acting this way." Lena sighed. "I didn't come here to compete with anyone. I just want to do my job and contribute like everyone else." Michelle gave her a sympathetic smile. "I know. But sometimes it's not about what you're doing. It's about how your presence makes someone else feel. You're a strong, confident black woman in a high-stakes environment. That can intimidate people who aren't as secure in themselves." The conversation weighed on Lena's mind as she returned to work the following Monday. She tried to remain positive, telling herself that things would smooth over in time. But instead of improving, the situation with Mark seemed to worsen. It started with small things, snide remarks disguised as jokes, subtle critiques of her work in front of others. Then it escalated. One day, Lena noticed a few of her colleagues glancing at her strangely as they whispered among themselves. When she entered the break room, conversation seemed to halt, and people avoided her gaze. It was unnerving, but Lena tried to push it out of her mind, focusing on her tasks for the day. However, it wasn't long before Lena overheard a conversation between Mark and another coworker, Rachel. They didn't see her approaching the break room as Mark casually remarked, "I don't know how she got this job. I heard she only got hired to meet diversity quotas. I mean, her work isn't even that impressive, if we're being honest." Lena froze, her stomach twisted into a knot, and her heart pounded in her chest. She had always heard about the challenges Black professionals faced in predominantly white workspaces, but this was the first time she had experienced it so blatantly. The insinuation that her accomplishments were somehow tied to her race rather than her merit was an all too familiar form of discrimination, one that stung deeply. She could have confronted them right then and there, but Lena knew that would only escalate the situation, potentially making her look overly emotional or defensive in the eyes of her peers. Instead, she retreated to her desk, her mind racing. How long had Mark been saying these things behind her back? Was this why her colleagues had been acting so strangely toward her? That evening, Lena lay awake in bed, replaying the conversation over and over in her head. She had worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to let someone like Mark undermine her career. She had earned her position based on skill and hard work, and she refused to let anyone make her feel otherwise. But she also knew that this was more than just a personal slight. Mark's comments weren't just damaging her reputation, they were feeding into harmful stereotypes and perpetuating a toxic work environment. Lena's thoughts turned to what Michelle had said. Sometimes it's not about what you're doing, it's about how your presence makes someone else feel. Mark felt threatened by her, and he was using her race as a weapon to discredit her. The question was, what could she do about it? The next morning, Lena arrived at work with a renewed sense of determination. She knew she had to be strategic. She couldn't let her emotions guide her actions. Instead, she needed to rely on facts, on evidence. If Mark wanted to play games, Lena would make sure the truth came to light. Quietly, she began documenting everything: emails, meetings, project updates, anything that could prove the quality of her work and expose the lies being spread about her. She wasn't sure how long it would take, but Lena knew one thing for certain. She wasn't going to let Mark's jealousy or prejudice define her future. She had come too far to let anyone stand in her way. Lena's struggle was far from over, but she was ready for the fight ahead. Her quiet resolve would soon become her greatest strength in a battle she hadn't chosen, but one she was determined to win. As the days unfolded, Lena's efforts to gather evidence became more meticulous. She documented every interaction with Mark, ensuring she had a detailed record of his actions. But the emotional toll of enduring such treatment weighed heavily on her, even as she maintained her professionalism. She couldn't help but wonder how long she could endure this subtle yet powerful discrimination before it broke her spirit. The journey ahead would be difficult, but Lena knew that her fight for fairness and respect was only just beginning. The whispers grew louder. As weeks passed, the subtle gossip about Lena began to morph into more blatant rumors. At first, it was just the occasional sideways glance or hushed conversation when she walked into the room. But soon, it became clear that Mark's lies were spreading and growing more dangerous. Every time Lena tried to contribute during a meeting, she felt the weight of the unspoken judgments around her. No one would directly accuse her of anything, but she could feel the atmosphere change. It all came to a head one day when Lena was working on an important campaign for a major client. Her ideas had been central to the project's success so far, and she had been leading the charge in crafting the marketing strategy. The client, a global tech company launching a new product, had high expectations, and Lena had been working long hours to ensure everything went smoothly. In a critical meeting, Lena presented her progress, explaining the key elements of the campaign she had developed. As she wrapped up her presentation, waiting for feedback from her team and supervisors, Mark spoke up. "I don't mean to be blunt," he said, leaning back in his chair, "but I think we need to reconsider this approach. It feels a bit uninspired, doesn't it? I've been hearing concerns from other departments about the direction we're taking here. I just think we should be careful not to get too attached to this particular strategy." Lena's stomach dropped. She hadn't heard anything from the other departments about concerns. If there had been issues, she would have been the first to know. But Mark's words landed like a heavy blow in the room. A few colleagues exchanged uncertain glances, and her supervisor, Sandra, frowned slightly, clearly unsure of how to respond. "I'm not sure where that feedback is coming from," Lena said carefully, trying to keep her voice steady. but I've been in close contact with the client and they seem pleased with the direction so far. We've received positive responses to all of the proposals. Mark gave a small, dismissive shrug. I just think we need to be careful. The last thing we want is to push forward with something that might not resonate with the client or the market. I'd hate for all of us to put in so much effort only to see it fall flat. The insinuation hung in the air like a dark cloud. Lena could feel her pulse quickening, but she forced herself to remain calm. Mark was planting seeds of doubt, not just about her project, but about her capabilities. And she knew from experience how damaging those seeds could be. After the meeting, Lena lingered in the conference room, replaying the conversation in her mind. Sandra approached her, a look of concern on her face. Lena, she began cautiously, I've been hearing some things lately and I just wanted to check in with you. Lena nodded, already anticipating what Sandra was about to say. What kinds of things? There's been some talk, nothing formal, just chatter. People have been saying that you're struggling to keep up with the workload. And Mark mentioned that there were some concerns about your leadership on this project. I just want to make sure you're feeling supported. Lena felt her chest tighten. The words, struggling to keep up, echoed in her mind, and it was clear to her that Mark's rumors were gaining traction. It was as if he was systematically trying to erode her credibility from every angle, creating an image of her as incompetent and incapable, even though her work had been nothing short of exemplary. I'm fine, Lena said, trying to keep her voice steady. I've been managing everything, and the client has been happy with our progress. I'm not sure where these rumors are coming from, but I assure you, my work is solid. Sandra gave her a sympathetic smile, but there was a flicker of doubt in her eyes. I trust you, Lena. But you know how these things go. Perception is a powerful thing. Just make sure you're staying on top of things. If you need help or support, don't hesitate to ask. Lena nodded, though inside she was seething. It wasn't her workload or leadership that was in question. It was Mark's deliberate attempts to sabotage her. But confronting him directly wouldn't solve anything. If anything, it would only make her look defensive or even paranoid. Mark was playing a game, and he was playing it well. Over the next few days, Lena noticed more subtle shifts in her colleagues' behavior. People who had once been friendly and collaborative now seemed distant, their conversations more stilted, their interactions more guarded. It was as if they were waiting for her to slip up, expecting her to prove the rumors right. Even worse, Lena found herself second-guessing everything she did. Was her work truly as good as she thought? Were there flaws she wasn't seeing? Mark's tactics had gotten under her skin, and despite her best efforts to remain focused, she felt the weight of his lies pressing down on her. One afternoon, while Lena was reviewing campaign materials at her desk, she received an email notification. The subject line caught her attention immediately. Concerns regarding campaign strategy. It was from one of the company's senior executives, someone who rarely emailed her directly. Lena's heart sank as she opened the message. Lena, I've been hearing some troubling feedback about the campaign you're leading for the Tech World launch. Several people have expressed concerns that the strategy may not be strong enough to meet the client's expectations. I would like to schedule a meeting to discuss these issues and explore alternative approaches. Please let me know your availability. Lena stared at the screen, her hands shaking slightly. This was it, the culmination of Mark's efforts to undermine her. He had planted doubts in enough people's minds that now even the higher-ups were starting to question her abilities. But what troubled Lena most wasn't just the email itself. It was the realization that Mark's lies had taken on a life of their own. They were no longer just rumors circulating among her immediate colleagues. They had reached the upper levels of the company. And once that kind of doubt took root, it was nearly impossible to shake. Lena felt a wave of frustration and helplessness wash over her. How could she fight against something so insidious? It wasn't like she could walk into the executive's office and accuse Mark of lying. It would sound paranoid and defensive. And without concrete proof, she had little chance of changing anyone's mind. But she wasn't ready to give up. Lena knew she had two options. She could let Mark's lies consume her and allow the rumors to dictate her fate, or she could fight back with the truth. And that's when a plan began to form in her mind. She would need to gather more than just her own observations. She needed real, undeniable evidence to expose Mark's deception and protect her career. It wasn't going to be easy, and it would take time, but Lena was prepared to play the long game. She would document everything, every interaction, every meeting, every email, and build a case that no one could ignore. She might not be able to stop the rumors immediately, but she would make sure that when the truth came out, it would be undeniable. As Lena sat at her desk, staring at the email from the executive, a quiet resolve settled over her. This was more than just about her reputation. It was about standing up for herself in the face of unjust treatment. She had worked too hard to let someone like Mark destroy everything she had built. The rumors might be spreading now, but Lena knew the truth was on her side, and she was determined to make sure it was heard. The office had grown quieter around Lena, but not in a way that brought comfort. Every conversation, every glance felt charged with unspoken tension. The rumors Mark had started were no longer whispered in dark corners. They were palpable, hanging in the air like a dense fog. Lena had always prided herself on being a professional, but even her ironclad resolve was starting to wear thin. It was clear that she was not just fighting against a single person anymore. She was battling the slow poison of doubt that Mark had seeded within the office walls. Despite everything, Lena continued to excel in her work. The campaign for TechWorld, the global tech giant that was her responsibility, was advancing, and all feedback directly from the client had been positive. But it didn't seem to matter. Inside the company, the narrative was shifting. Whenever Lena offered suggestions or solutions in meetings, there was a noticeable hesitation from her colleagues before they responded. It was as if they were waiting for her to fail, waiting for the moment when Mark's lies would prove to be true. Her interactions with her team had become more strained as well. Rachel, who had once been friendly, now kept her distance. Others followed suit, keeping conversations strictly business. Lena noticed the subtle signs. People no longer stopped by her desk for casual chats, and lunch invitations had all but disappeared. It was isolating, and Lena felt the weight of it daily. Mark, meanwhile, seemed to revel in the shift. He continued to smile and act polite, but Lena could see the satisfaction in his eyes. He was winning the battle, or so he thought. One afternoon, Lena received an email notification for a sudden meeting with her manager, Sandra. Her heart sank as she clicked open the message. It was brief, asking her to come by Sandra's office at the end of the day for a quick check-in. Lena had been anticipating this for weeks. She had felt the pressure building, the unspoken doubts creeping into her supervisor's view. And now it seemed Sandra was finally ready to address whatever concerns had reached her desk. As Lena made her way to Sandra's office, she mentally prepared herself. She knew the meeting would likely involve more than just her performance. It would be about the rumors. Sandra had always been supportive, but even the most well-meaning managers could be swayed by gossip. Lena took a deep breath and knocked on the door. "Come in," Sandra called. Lena stepped inside, the office cool and dimly lit compared to the bright open space of the main floor. Sandra sat behind her desk, looking up with a kind, though slightly concerned expression. Lena took a seat across from her, bracing for the conversation. "Lena, I want to start by saying how much we appreciate your work on the TechWorld campaign," Sandra began, folding her hands on the desk. "You've done an excellent job so far, and the client has been happy with the progress." Lena nodded, though she knew there was a but coming. "But," Sandra continued, her voice softening, "there have been some concerns raised recently, and I wanted to check in with you about them. It seems that a few people are questioning the strategy you've developed. I've also heard that there's some talk about you struggling to manage the workload." There it was. The rumors had officially reached her supervisor. Lena forced herself to stay calm, her voice steady as she replied, "I'm aware that there have been some rumors circulating. But I want to assure you, Sandra, that the work is well in hand. The client has been consistently satisfied with the progress, and I've been closely managing every aspect of the campaign." Sandra nodded slowly, but the doubt was still there, etched in the furrow of her brow. "I believe you, Lena. I do. But perception can be tricky, especially in a place like this. I just want to make sure you're not feeling overwhelmed. If there's anything you need support with, I want you to feel comfortable speaking up." Lena appreciated Sandra's attempt to be supportive, but she knew this was more than just a simple check-in. The rumors were starting to affect how people saw her, even those who trusted her. And as much as Lena wanted to say she was fine, she couldn't ignore the reality that Mark's campaign against her was working. "I'm managing fine, Sandra," Lena said, her voice firm but respectful. "But I think it's important to address where these concerns are coming from. The feedback I've received directly from the client has been nothing but positive, so I'm not sure why there's a perception that I'm struggling. I've been documenting all of my progress, and I'm happy to share that with you if needed." Sandra leaned back in her chair, considering Lena's words. "That's good to hear. I trust your work, Lena, but I would encourage you to keep an eye on your team dynamics as well. If there's friction, it might be affecting how people are interpreting things." Lena knew what Sandra was getting at without her saying it directly. It was a subtle reminder that the team's perception of her could be just as important as the quality of her work. And right now, thanks to Mark, that perception was being chipped away. After the meeting, Lena felt the full weight of the situation. She had always believed that doing good work would be enough to speak for itself. But now she realized that in this environment, it wasn't just about what she did, it was about what others believed about her. And right now, they were believing Mark's lies. Determined not to let things continue spiraling, Lena decided it was time to take action. She couldn't sit idly by while her reputation was being dismantled. She'd been documenting her work for weeks, but now she needed to gather more concrete evidence. She needed to expose Mark's behavior and make it clear that his actions were rooted in jealousy, not truth. Lena began to pay closer attention to Mark's movements and interactions, looking for patterns in his behavior. It became clear to her that Mark was not only undermining her in meetings, but also privately planting doubts in the minds of their colleagues. Whenever she presented a new idea or took the lead on a project, Mark would find ways to subtly undercut her, either by questioning her competence or by suggesting alternative approaches that contradicted hers. One day, Lena caught a glimpse of Mark chatting with another colleague, Rachel, near the break room. They didn't notice her standing a few feet away as they talked in hushed tones. "She's just not cut out for this," Mark was saying. "I don't know why management keeps letting her run point on these campaigns. Someone's going to have to clean up the mess when this tech world thing inevitably falls apart." Rachel, looking uncertain, nodded along but didn't fully engage in the conversation. Lena clenched her fists. It was one thing for Mark to undermine her in meetings, but now he was actively working behind the scenes to dismantle her credibility. That was when Lena made the decision to confront Mark, but not in the way he would expect. She knew that a direct confrontation would only play into his hands. Instead, she would confront him with evidence, not anger. It was time to escalate the situation to HR. Lena spent the next few days compiling everything she had documented: emails, notes from meetings, performance reviews, and most importantly, the direct feedback from TechWorld that praised her work. She cross-referenced her work against the comments Mark had made, ensuring that she had a detailed record that would stand up to scrutiny. When she felt confident that she had enough, Lena scheduled a meeting with HR. She knew it was a risk, but at this point, it was her only option. She had to protect her career and her reputation. As she walked into HR's office, clutching the evidence she had so carefully gathered, Lena felt a sense of determination. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting against the toxic behavior that had been allowed to fester within the company for too long. This was more than just a professional battle, it was personal. Lena sat down across from the HR representative, her heart pounding but her resolve unshaken. She was ready to reveal the truth, no matter the cost. It was time for the lies to end, and for Mark to face the consequences of his actions. This was only the beginning of a larger confrontation, but Lena knew she was ready. The growing tension was about to break, and she would make sure she came out on the other side with her integrity intact. Lena's hands were steady as she handed over the neatly organized folder of evidence to the HR representative, Sarah Hastings. The folder contained weeks of documentation, each piece of evidence meticulously labeled and detailed. It wasn't just a defense of her performance. It was a carefully crafted narrative of Mark's actions and behavior, designed to expose the truth. She had thought long and hard about how to approach this moment, knowing it was a crucial turning point. Sarah, a no-nonsense woman in her mid-40s, with sharp eyes and an air of professionalism, glanced at the folder before looking back at Lena. "Thank you for coming in, Lena. I understand this has been a difficult time, and I want to assure you that we take these matters very seriously. I've heard about some of the concerns you've raised, and I'd like to walk through them with you today." Lena nodded, her mind racing. This was the moment she had been preparing for, but it didn't make it any less nerve-wracking. She had built her career on the foundation of hard work, professionalism, and integrity, and now everything seemed to hang on how well she could present her case. Sarah opened the folder and began skimming through the first few pages. Lena had provided a chronological breakdown of events, the gradual shift in her colleagues' behavior, the rumors that had started to spread, and specific examples of Mark's undermining comments during meetings. Each entry was supported by emails, performance reports, and notes from the client that praised Lena's contributions. "Before we dive into this," Sarah said, looking up from the folder, "I want to ask, have you spoken directly with Mark about any of these issues?" Lena hesitated for a moment, knowing that this question was inevitable. "I haven't confronted him directly," she admitted. "Given the nature of his behavior and the way he's been spreading rumors behind my back, I didn't think it would be productive. He's been careful to undermine me subtly, and I didn't want to escalate the situation without proper evidence." Sarah nodded, her expression neutral. "That's understandable. We always encourage open communication between colleagues, but in cases like this, I can see why you'd want to gather evidence first. Let's go through some of these examples." For the next hour, Lena walked Sarah through each piece of evidence. She highlighted the patterns of behavior, how Mark had discredited her ideas in meetings, taken credit for her work, and spread false rumors about her competence. She also presented the email from the senior executive questioning her campaign strategy, which had clearly been influenced by the rumors Mark had spread. Finally, Lena showed the positive feedback she had received directly from the tech world client, proving that the campaign was progressing successfully despite the internal doubts Mark had sown. Sarah listened attentively, taking notes and occasionally asking clarifying questions. As the meeting went on, Lena could feel the weight of weeks of stress starting to lift from her shoulders. She had done everything she could to present a clear, compelling case, and now it was up to HR to act. When they finished reviewing the evidence, Sarah leaned back in her chair, folding her hands thoughtfully. "Lena, I appreciate how thorough you've been with all of this. It's clear that you've put a lot of effort into documenting your experiences. And from what I've seen so far, there are some serious concerns here. I'll need to conduct a full investigation, which will involve speaking with Mark and some of your colleagues to get their perspectives." Lena nodded, though the thought of Mark's reaction made her uneasy. She knew he wouldn't take kindly to being confronted by HR, especially with the weight of evidence against him. Still, she had no choice but to trust the process. She had done her part. Now, it was in HR's hands. "I understand," Lena said, keeping her voice steady. "I just want to make sure the truth comes out. I've worked hard for this company, and I've always done my best to contribute positively to the team. I don't want what's happening with Mark to overshadow that." Sarah gave her a reassuring nod. "We'll make sure to handle this fairly and thoroughly. In the meantime, if anything else comes up, please don't hesitate to reach out." Lena left the meeting with a mixture of relief and apprehension. She had taken a significant step forward in addressing the toxic environment Mark had created, but there was still a long road ahead. HR investigations could take time, and Lena knew that Mark wouldn't go down without a fight. As much as she wanted to believe that the evidence would speak for itself, she also understood how difficult it could be to change people's minds once doubt had taken root. The next few days passed in a haze of tension. Lena continued her work as usual, but the atmosphere in the office had shifted. She could feel the weight of the impending investigation looming over her. And though no one had said anything directly, there was a subtle change in how people interacted with her. Mark, for his part, seemed oblivious to the storm brewing. He continued his usual routine, speaking with colleagues as if nothing had changed. But Lena knew better. She had planted the seeds of truth, and it was only a matter of time before they grew into something undeniable. 2 weeks after her meeting with HR, Sarah called Lena back for a follow-up. When Lena arrived in the HR office, she noticed that the atmosphere was more formal this time. Sarah's face was serious, and next to her sat another HR representative, someone Lena hadn't met before. "Lena, thank you for coming in," Sarah began, her voice calm but purposeful. "We've completed our investigation into the concerns you raised, and we'd like to share the findings with you." Lena's heart raced, but she forced herself to stay composed. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. "As part of our investigation, we conducted interviews with Mark, several of your colleagues, and your supervisor. We also reviewed the documentation you provided, along with other relevant materials," Sarah continued. "Based on the evidence, we have determined that Mark's behavior has indeed been inappropriate and unprofessional. His attempts to undermine your work and spread false information have been well documented, and we've concluded that his actions were driven by personal jealousy rather than any legitimate concerns about your performance." Lena let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The truth had finally come to light. "As a result," Sarah said, her tone firm, "we have decided to terminate Mark's employment effective immediately. His behavior is not in line with the values of this company, and we will not tolerate any form of harassment or sabotage in the workplace." Lena felt a wave of relief wash over her. It was finally over. Mark, the source of so much of her stress and frustration, was being held accountable for his actions. The lies he had spread, the damage he had tried to inflict on her career, it was all coming back to him now. For the first time in weeks, Lena felt a sense of justice. "We also want to acknowledge the toll this situation has taken on you," Sarah added. "We'll be working with your team and management to ensure a more supportive and inclusive environment moving forward. If there's anything more we can do to support you, please don't hesitate to let us know." Lena nodded, feeling the weight of everything she had endured finally start to lift. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I appreciate everything you've done." As she left the HR office, Lena's thoughts turned to the future. Mark's lies had been exposed, and she had not only protected her own career, but had also set an example for others who might face similar challenges. She had stood up for herself in the face of adversity, and she had won. Walking back to her desk, Lena felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew the battle wasn't just about her. It was about creating a workplace where everyone could thrive, free from the shadows of prejudice and sabotage. And though the journey had been difficult, Lena knew she was stronger for it. She smiled to herself, knowing that her story wasn't over. It was just beginning. The news of Mark's termination spread through the office like wildfire. But unlike the rumors he had seeded, this information was met with a collective sense of relief. For Lena, it felt like a cloud had been lifted from the workplace atmosphere. Conversations that had once halted upon her arrival now resumed with a renewed energy, and colleagues who had kept their distance began reaching out once more, eager to reconnect. In the days following Mark's departure, Lena found herself at the center of many conversations. Colleagues approached her, offering support and expressing their disbelief at the lengths Mark had gone to undermine her. Rachel, who had previously been reticent, was among the first to reach out. She approached Lena one afternoon as they both returned from the break room. "Hey, Lena," Rachel said, a nervous smile on her face. "I just wanted to say that I'm really sorry about everything. I didn't realize how bad it had gotten with Mark. I feel terrible for not speaking up sooner." Lena appreciated Rachel's honesty. "It's okay. I get it. It can be hard to know how to respond in situations like that. I just want to move forward and make sure we create a better environment for everyone." Rachel nodded earnestly. "Absolutely. We should all be looking out for each other. If there's anything I can do to support you, please let me know." As the week progressed, more and more colleagues came forward to show their support. Lena felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. The change in the office culture was palpable, and it was clear that Mark's absence had created a space for healing. People were more open, more collaborative, and they genuinely seemed eager to foster a sense of camaraderie. On a Friday afternoon, Sandra called a team meeting to discuss the changes and improvements that would be implemented in light of recent events. The meeting room buzzed with anticipation as colleagues settled into their seats. Lena felt a flutter of nerves, but she knew that this was an opportunity to address the culture of the workplace head-on. First and foremost, Sandra began, I want to thank everyone for their continued dedication during a challenging time. We've had some important conversations about workplace dynamics and how we can foster a more inclusive environment. Moving forward, we'll be implementing regular team-building activities and diversity training to ensure everyone feels valued and respected. As Sandra spoke, Lena felt a sense of pride swell within her. This was a crucial moment, not just for her but for everyone in the room. The company was taking tangible steps to prevent future issues, and Lena knew that her fight had contributed to this positive change. Lena, I'd like to take a moment to recognize you for your courage and professionalism throughout this ordeal, Sandra said, turning her attention to Lena. It takes a lot of strength to stand up against toxicity, and you've shown us all what it means to advocate for yourself and for a positive work environment. Thank you for setting an example for all of us. Lena felt her cheeks flush as her colleagues applauded. Thank you, everyone, she said, her voice warm but steady. I truly believe that we can all create a better workplace together. Let's support one another and keep the lines of communication open. It's important that we all feel safe and valued here. After the meeting, several colleagues approached Lena, eager to connect. Conversations flowed easily, filled with laughter and a sense of community that had been missing for far too long. For the first time in weeks, Lena felt like she could breathe easily, and her passion for her work was reignited. As the weeks turned into months, Lena continued to excel in her role. She led the successful launch of the Tech World campaign, which received accolades from both the client and upper management. Her ideas and contributions were not just acknowledged, but celebrated. It was clear that the efforts she had put into gathering evidence and standing up for herself had paid off. But the changes were not just professional. They were personal as well. Lena formed deeper connections with her colleagues, cultivating friendships that extended beyond the workplace. She began to feel a sense of belonging that had eluded her during the dark days of Mark's sabotage. One evening, after a particularly successful day of meetings, Lena and a group of colleagues went out for drinks to celebrate. As they laughed and shared stories, Lena felt a warmth in her heart. It was a stark contrast to the isolation she had experienced just months prior. Lena, you've really changed the atmosphere around here, Michelle, her friend from outside the office, said during the outing. You've shown everyone that standing up for yourself is not just about fighting back. It's about creating space for everyone to thrive. You're inspiring. Lena smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. I couldn't have done it without all of you. This is a team effort, and I'm just glad to be part of it. As the evening wound down, Lena reflected on her journey. She had faced significant challenges, yet each hurdle had ultimately led her to this moment of triumph. Her career was on an upward trajectory, and she was determined to continue building a workplace where everyone felt empowered. With the company implementing new policies and focusing on diversity and inclusion, Lena felt hopeful for the future. She had not only reclaimed her narrative, but had also sparked change that would benefit her colleagues and the company as a whole. It was a legacy she was proud to be a part of. One day, as Lena was preparing for a presentation, she received an unexpected email from HR. Subject: invitation to speak at the annual Diversity and Inclusion Conference. Her heart raced as she opened the message. The email invited her to share her experiences and insights about overcoming workplace adversity and fostering a culture of inclusivity. They had heard about the positive changes since Mark's departure and wanted her voice to be part of the conversation on a larger scale. Lena felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. Speaking publicly was a new challenge, but she recognized the importance of sharing her story. This was an opportunity to not only highlight her journey, but also to empower others who might find themselves in similar situations. After giving it careful thought, Lena replied to the email, accepting the invitation. She realized that her experience was not just a personal battle. It was a message of hope for others who faced similar challenges. She wanted to show them that change was possible, that they could reclaim their narratives, and that every voice mattered. As Lena prepared for the upcoming conference, she knew it would be a significant moment in her journey. She had transformed from a woman fighting for her reputation into an advocate for change. It was a role she never expected to take on, but one she felt deeply committed to. In the weeks leading up to the conference, Lena spent time crafting her speech, reflecting on the lessons she had learned. She drew from her experiences and the support of her colleagues, weaving a narrative that highlighted resilience, collaboration, and the power of truth. On the day of the conference, Lena stood backstage, nerves tingling in her stomach. As she listened to the audience chatter and the buzz of anticipation filled the air, she reminded herself of everything she had overcome. She was ready to step into the spotlight, to share her story with others, and to inspire change. When it was her turn to speak, Lena took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. The room fell silent as she began, her voice steady and strong. She spoke from the heart, sharing her journey, the challenges she faced, and the importance of standing up for oneself. With each word, she felt a growing sense of purpose. As she finished her speech, the audience erupted into applause, and Lena felt a sense of fulfillment wash over her. This was more than just a personal victory. It was a collective triumph. She had taken her struggles and transformed them into a message of hope and empowerment. Afterward, many attendees approached her, expressing gratitude for her story. They shared their own experiences and the challenges they faced in their workplaces. Lena listened intently, offering support and encouragement. In that moment, she realized that her journey was just the beginning. Through her resilience, she had not only reclaimed her narrative, but had also sparked a movement toward change. The seeds of her story would continue to grow, inspiring others to stand up for themselves and foster an inclusive environment where everyone could thrive. Lena walked away from the conference feeling empowered and hopeful. She had faced her struggles head-on and emerged stronger than ever. And now, she was ready to continue her journey, advocating for change and supporting those around her. With a heart full of purpose and a renewed sense of direction, Lena knew that her story was not just her own. It was a testament to the power of resilience, truth, and community. And she was determined to make a difference, one step at a time. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Click on the video now to watch. We appreciate your support, and we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments.